All right, let's dive into one of the most, well, puzzling phrases in the entire New Testament. It shows up at two absolutely critical moments in Jesus' life, and it's directed at his own mother.
I mean, it's a question you've probably asked yourself, right? You're reading along, maybe the story of the wedding at Cana or the crucifixion, and suddenly Jesus looks at Mary and calls her woman. Not mom, not mother, but woman.
And let's just be real for a second. In our world today, if you called your mom woman, you'd probably be in some serious trouble. It just sounds so distant, impersonal, maybe even rude. But is that what was actually going on?
To really get to the bottom of this, we have to do a little time traveling. We need to peel back a couple thousand years of history and translation and really immerse ourselves in the world of the first century.
Okay, so in the original Greek of the Gospels, the word Jesus uses is gynē. And here's the first major clue. In that time and place, gynē wasn't disrespectful at all. It was actually a common and totally polite way to address a woman. The best way to think about it is this. A better modern English translation wouldn't be the flat, cold word woman. It would be something much more like ma'am or even madam. It carries a weight of respect. And we know this wasn't a one-off thing just for his mom. Jesus uses this exact same term, gynē, when he's speaking respectfully to other women all through the Gospels, like Mary Magdalene at the empty tomb. So it clearly wasn't some kind of personal insult. So, case closed, right? It was just a polite term. Well, not quite. And this is where the story gets really interesting. Because even though gynē was respectful, our sources point out that it was still super unusual for a son to call his own mother that. And that just deepens the mystery, doesn't it? If the word itself was polite, but using it in that specific relationship was strange, then something else must be going on. It wasn't an insult. So what was Jesus trying to say? What was he signaling with such a specific and intentional title? Well, the answer isn't in a simple dictionary definition. It's in theology, and it's a direct callback to the very first book of the Bible, all the way back in Genesis. You might recognize this verse. It's from Genesis 3:15, sometimes called the first gospel. Right after Adam and Eve fall, God makes this incredible promise. He's speaking to the serpent, and he talks about a future showdown between the serpent and a key figure he calls the woman, and her offspring will be the one to deliver the final blow. Now, to really grasp this, you have to understand something called biblical typology. It's this idea that people and events in the Old Testament often act as a kind of foreshadowing, a type, that points ahead to a bigger, more complete fulfillment in the New Testament, the antitype. And that is exactly what is happening here. So check this out. Eve was the first woman, and through her disobedience, prompted by a serpent, sin enters the world. Now fast forward to the Gospels. Mary, who Jesus calls woman, prompts Jesus at Cana to begin his work of redemption. Her perfect obedience is the complete reversal of Eve's disobedience. She is, in a profound sense, the new Eve. And this wasn't just a random title he threw out once. Jesus is incredibly precise. He uses this title at two very specific moments that perfectly bookend his entire public ministry. Think about it. At the wedding at Cana, the very launch of his mission, he calls her woman. And then at the crucifixion, the absolute summit of his entire life's work, he calls her woman again. You see the symmetry? This is completely intentional. It frames everything. So at the cross, that ancient prophecy from Genesis comes full circle. The offspring of the woman is finally crushing the serpent's head. And in that very moment of victory, Jesus looks down, identifies his mother with that same prophetic title, and gives her a brand new mission. And now, of course, it's important to know there are different ways to look at this. Some will argue that the title is meant to show some distance, or that Mary was just an ordinary woman. But the counter-arguments presented in the sources are really powerful. They say, look, the word was respectful, and more importantly, the theological connection to Genesis and the new Eve gives her an extraordinary role, not an ordinary one. So, when you put all these pieces on the table, the language, the culture, the deep biblical theology, you start to see that woman isn't a slight at all. It's actually a title of incredible honor. At the end of the day, woman is a theological title. It's Jesus publicly declaring her to be the new Eve. It identifies her as that long-awaited figure from Genesis. And it lifts her role beyond just being his biological mom to being his partner in salvation,
a spiritual mother for all of humanity. And it all comes to a head in that incredible moment on the cross. When Jesus says, "Woman, behold your son," he's not just talking about John, the disciple standing there. John represents all of us, the entire church. He's giving his mother to us, and us to his mother. So, no, Jesus calling his mother woman was never about creating distance. It was about declaring her destiny. It's a title that connects the very beginning of creation to the very beginning of the church, and it places Mary right at the heart of that entire story. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If a single, simple word that we might just skim over can hold that much meaning, what other incredible truths are just waiting for us, hiding just beneath the surface of the texts we thought we knew so well?